actually discussing.
Am I?
Oh, can you raise your hands? That's actually a good idea. Yeah.
One mouth.
If you're not,
Quasi kein narrative and make
Where are you? Yeah. We done?
Yeah. I'm out. You
All
guys
right.
talk.
I think it's a good use of necessary and proper. Why? Because I do feel that the bank is on some level necessary, and that's what the necessary and proper clause is for, to help them do their job better.
I totally agree with that. I think that for Congress to do its enumerated powers to lay and collect taxes, to borrow money, to regulate commerce, to declare and conduct and conduct a war, to raise and support armies and navies, like for all those things, they definitely need to be able to manage their money. And I think that the necessary and proper clause definitely gives them the power to decide for themselves the best way to execute their enumerated powers. And I think Marshall's right in saying that the welfare of the nation depends on the bank.
I mean, the most kind of convincing thing that Marshall said for me was that when he was saying what would be the case if Congress was super restricted and didn't have this necessary and proper clause, where he said the baneful influence of this narrow construction on all the operations of government and the absolute impracticality of maintaining it without rendering the government incompetent to its great objects might be illustrated by numerous examples drawn from the Constitution or our laws. Basically, I thought he was saying that, like, if Congress had to strictly abide by only the enumerated powers, they wouldn't be able to do anything. It would be completely inefficient, and nothing would really ever get done.
Yeah, the example he gives just above that line you just read of how saying the power Congress has to establish post roads and post offices, that's the power they have, but then the implied power is that they need to be able to maintain it and punish people who steal from them in order to keep it alive, which I thought was a interesting example that he gave.
So we're all in agreement that Marshall's used enumerated powers correctly in this case, and that the bank was used implied powers correctly, and that the bank was permitted by the necessary and proper clause. But I'm kind of wondering to what extent can you use that clause? Like, how far can you take it before it becomes unconstitutional?
Right, like, can I bring up the modern example of the Obamacare law? Talking about the Affordable Care Act, like, I don't know how people feel, but that's the use of the necessary and proper clause. So, is that too far? Like, what's too far? Because I wouldn't consider that to be too far.
I think it's too far when the necessary and proper clause is being used for something that's not going to help Congress do its enumerated powers. So with the post road example he gave, it's their power to establish post offices and post roads, and in order to do that, there are implied powers that they have, but once they start like giving themselves the power to do things that don't help them do their enumerated powers, if that makes sense, then I think that's when it's too far.
Yeah, because you can see how this would be like a slippery slope, because as like in the Affordable Care Act Supreme Court case, what they said was that like the government was basically using their right to collect taxes when they were taking the fine, and that's other taxes. And like I'm just wondering if any time the government takes money from a citizen, is it constitutional because it's a tax? are those kinds of fines constitutional always? And what's to stop the government from, you know, like obstructing your right to like private property, you know, and just taking your property away for like without you doing anything wrong.
Right, so the problem I run into there is every time that I like stretch this, I run into like one of the Bill of Rights things. So like if you stretch it to private property, like we have the right to private property, so that you hit like a limit. And so I wonder if there's somewhere you can stretch it where you don't hit that kind of limit. You know what I mean? Because there are
Yeah.
things that are explicitly not allowed to do.
So are you saying that Congress should have the power to do whatever they want as long as it's not explicitly said that they can't?
I mean, I think, I'm not necessarily, but I think that I would say that a very loose reading of their enumerated powers, I think is a good thing, because there are lots of things that when the Constitution was being written weren't necessarily thought about that I think are important things for Congress to do. And so that doesn't mean I would like them to have the power to do everything, but I think it's best if we interpret clauses like this loosely, because it gives them power to do things that I think are beneficial.
I mean, a hypothetical where you allow Congress to do anything they want as long as it's not in that, you know, in Article 1, Section 9, where it states specifically what they cannot do. It's an interesting hypothetical because would that be like such a bad thing if Congress did whatever they want within those limits? Or could it be seen as a positive?
Depends how they use it.
But I think I kind of agree with Grant. It's like, what's the worst they could do that's not explicitly not allowed at this point?
I mean, can we think of something that's not in the powers section, but also, like, it's definitely not an enumerated power, but it is also definitely not a kind of one of the powers that's laid out that they can't do? Like, if there's an example of that.
Would you like for me to give you one, or do you want
Yeah,
to figure
sure.
one out on your own?
You can give us one.
Okay. So this was a case called Wiggard against Filburn, and so basically the case was this.
Congress passed a law, and the law said that nobody is allowed to grow any more than X amount of grain on their property. Period. That was a law. The problem was that it was a bumper crop, and thus prices of grain were dropping, and farmers were getting killed, and so they basically tried to limit the amount of grain that was produced, so the prices would start going up and help farmers start making some money. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Congress decided that it was going to pass a law saying that no one could produce any more than X amount of grain on their property. This fellow, Roscoe Filburn, was a farmer, and he was a chicken farmer, and he only it was chickens for his own use, etc. And he grew grain on his land to feed his chickens. Period. He never sold an ounce of it to anybody, anywhere. Entirely his own wheat, his own grain. But it was more than the government allowed. And the government came in and they burned his crops. And he said, "You can't do this. Is my own private property." And I think this you guys are getting at this, right? That this is my own private property. You don't have the right. Like, I get that you have the right under the Commerce Clause, government, to regulate commerce, but I'm not selling this to anybody.
Right.
So far, so good. Here's what. So you're like, if you're thinking right now, I don't see a constitutional right for the government to pass a law like that. Okay, so here's what the Supreme Court said. They said, yeah, Roscoe Filburn, you're right. You didn't sell it to anybody, and therefore, technically, it's not commerce. However, the amount of wheat that you buy or don't buy because of your producing it is going to impact the amount of grain that is sold in all markets. And so therefore, the amount of grain that you produce has an impact on the general commerce of meat in the entire country. And so therefore, under the Commerce Clause, the federal government did have the right to pass that that law restricting everybody's production of grain, regardless of whether they sell it or not.
Right.
Is that a good example?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, back at it.
I think that's too far an extension, and I see their reasoning, but I don't think that that's an implied power that they have.
But the problem I run into with that is like, it seems wrong to me, but what exactly else are they going to do? Like, it seems like this law has real positive effects, and perhaps there are alternatives, but this is the easiest way to get that positive effect. And so,
Does the ends justify the means, though?
right, I guess that's essentially the question.
I mean, if we're gonna say that the banks, help Congress, the banks are necessary and proper for Congress to mint coins and regulate currency and fulfill all their their bank-like enumerated powers, then can we say that going onto someone's private property and burning a crop isn't necessary and proper in regulating commerce? Because they seem like almost the same thing, just different examples.
Okay, I have a question. The necessary part of this, I get, but what exactly does the proper part mean? Like, what are you guys interpreting something being proper to mean? Because I mean, necessary seems straightforward. Like, it's necessary for Congress to do their job. But what exactly does proper mean?
I think proper means abiding by American values.
That's so vague, though. Like, how are we going to check that something abides by American values? And what exactly are American
what
values?
we're gonna define as like the value, especially with like the two with like a two-party system that like it's like bound to always happen pretty much. Like usually both parties like see American values that I the core American value as like very different things. Like what's most important. So like what where would that fall?
Instead of American values, what would you say proper means? That's not the right.
Like, I'm stuck on, does proper mean like that you're not breaking the law? Does proper mean that it doesn't, like, what, I'm just stuck on what exactly it means.
I think what it means is, in the end, purposefully vague. Like, it's meant to be interpreted differently. It's because saying necessary and proper is so subjective. I think it's really up to, I guess, Congress and thereby extension the voters, what is necessary and proper. And then I guess also the Supreme Court can determine what is necessary and proper, and also the executive branch can determine necessary and proper. So in order for necessary and proper, for any law to be passed, all three branches have to be in agreement about what is necessary and proper.
But I'm asking like on a Supreme Court, like law level.
Yeah,
Like I understand that
deciding.
the executive branch might have its own interpretation, but like if we were a Supreme Court justice, what is the best way to define this thing?
The only way I keep thinking of is just that it's constitutional, proper means constitutional. That's what I keep thinking of, and I think if it was just
That is, I missed what you said. That is what?
that proper meaning constitutional.
Then why doesn't it just say constitutional?
Or I mean, I think that seems obvious, right? Like no law can be unconstitutional.
Well, I think if you just left it at necessary, you could make an argument that a law that goes against people's rights is necessary, but it may impede on people's
So it's like saying that no part of a constitution trumps another part of the constitution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really agree with that.
I mean, like, what would it be if you could, if this law was worded differently and it just said, to make all laws which shall be necessary for carrying out the execution of the foregoing powers? How would that be different than if they were to say necessary and proper? Like, what would be the
Well, I
difference between
guess
necessary alone and necessary and proper?
I think, well,
Okay.
Marshall kind of brings up a point about necessary and proper helping the Constitution apply to different time periods. And I think if you're thinking about that a little bit, like looking at different political situations or what's going on within the country, like, I can't think of a specific example, but if like there's chaos, it's saying even in chaos you still have to abide by the Constitution.
So the proper part is like, the proper part is what gives them that wiggle room.
Yeah.
Actually, I think
I think give them less wiggle room.
Well, yeah, well,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's like saying like if you want to if Congress wanted to like keep the welfare of like commerce and everything and regulate it, they can't outlaw someone saying
Yeah.
saying that a certain brand of wheat is bad because that would be bad for the economy. They can't do that because of freedom of speech.
So it's like a pushback on the wartime argument. Like even if we're at war, people still have all their rights.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
Interesting.
what would be interpreted as proper during a time of peace is different than what would be proper during a time of war.
Oh,
So
so you're
during-
saying the opposite.
So I'm saying like it's more strict during, in this example, peacetime, and more loose during a time of war, because during a time of war you can make things like, you know, for example, the Alien and Sedition Act,
Yeah.
which was deemed to be proper at that time because of the danger. But at another time, it was at, say, like earlier, it was improper, like during, I guess, Washington's administration.
But deemed to be proper, but deemed to be proper by who? Because there was no judicial review yet. Was
Deemed to
there?
be proper by Congress at that point. Well, by some it was proper. For some it was proper. For the people who made the law, it was proper. But for the, you know, the Southerners and the Kentucky Revolution, I'm sure, and all that other stuff, it was improper. But
I think you could use proper to go the other way though, to say that it's saying that no matter what you do, it has to be constitutional. That like even if we're at wartime and even if you feel this is necessary, it still has to be proper. It still has to be constitutional. So I think it could
so
go the
proper
other
doesn't
way.
so proper doesn't change during peace and war.
Right, I think it could go the other way. That proper is there to keep governments from going, we're at war, so we can do whatever we want.
Let's bring this back to the, because it's fabulous and I think it's a really important abstract discussion. And I think you guys are spot on in trying to figure out what the word proper might mean. Can we bring it back to either something specific or any other questions on the couple minutes left? I would love just to redirect just for a moment back to something I think it was that you were getting at. Not too long ago, Grant, about what I think you were basically getting at this question, right? Is the necessary and proper clause really basically just a blank check to Congress? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so can we? I'd just love to hear your thoughts.
Blank check that could be struck down by Supreme Court.
Yeah, but let's remember that judicial review didn't exist when the Constitution was
We're talking about
written.
or did it according?
Well, yeah, I think it's it's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, well,
But-
whether or not it existed, I think I would kind of agree with Brent that like it gives Congress the power to do everything it wants to until it reaches a certain point.
Yeah, and that breaking point is
Oh my
not that there is a breaking point, and that breaking point lies where the executive branch or the judicial branch checks their power. So it's a blank check to a point until their powers it's a check. It's a blank check until their power is checked by another branch.
Which would be, is that what you're getting at?
Okay.
I never ever thought about this, but that's a fascinating.
I can't read it.
Did Marshall expand or use the necessary proper clause to empower the Supreme Court? You get what I'm
Yes.
saying? I'm wondering, I don't know. I'm way too
Right,
long.
like,
Wait, did Marshall expand?
It's hard because the judicial branch wouldn't have been able to do anything about this until they get a case about it. Right?
yeah,
You mean about something that could violate?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they can't do anything until after citizens have been violated in some way.
So do you think that makes it a bad system?
Somewhat, yeah.
but like, so yeah, so Marshall's, where Marshall was using so like, I think the question Mr. Gannon has posed for us is, does Marshall's ruling here about necessary and proper expand the Supreme
Tickets for
Court's
St.
power?
John are on sale today during lunch.
It does is-
Hold on, wait,
We'll be
pause,
in
I wanna
line,
hear your thought,
Yeah.
and you'll unfortunately be the last one.
So buy them, yeah.
By then, yeah. Go ahead.
It seems like, yeah, it does, because he has just given himself the power to decide when something is proper or not, when something is necessary and proper. And he, in this case, he decided, yes, it is necessary and proper, but there's nothing to stop him in future from deciding something is not necessary and proper, thereby limiting the Congress, who used to be able to decide for themselves, and empowering the Supreme Court, who could decide for
Hi
Congress now.
everybody, Interfaith Club will not be meeting today.